What if the world's most secure prison couldn't hold its most dangerous inmate? Imagine towering fences, massive watchtowers, a strict no-fly zone, a place deemed utterly escape-proof, yet on one extraordinary day, the impossible happened. Someone vanished. That someone is El Chapo, the world's most powerful drug lord. He won't resort to violence or scale any walls. Instead, he'll simply step into his shower and disappear. This is the incredible tale of how El Chapo rose to become one of history's most successful drug kingpins. How he eluded authorities for decades, repeatedly escaping their grasp, and how, in the end, an interview with a Hollywood actor and a stalled car engine finally led to his capture. Joaquín Archibaldo Guzmán Lora was born on April 4, 1957, in the poverty in La Tuna, a village nestled in Mexico's Sierra Madre Mountains. Here, young boys don't dream of being astronauts or doctors. They aspire to be drug traffickers. It's seen as the only path to money, and money is a way out. Guzmán quickly earned the nickname El Chapo, Shorty, due to his height. Standing at just 5 feet, 5 inches, he left school early, not even finishing elementary, instead working in the family trade, cultivating marijuana and poppy fields. From a young age, El Chapo was fiercely ambitious. He befriended influential figures in the local drug scene, determined to climb the ranks of Mexican organized crime. He started as a problem solver. If a drug shipment went off schedule, El Chapo would eliminate the responsible party. His ruthless efficiency earned him trust, and he became close to the kingpin of the Guadalajara Cartel. When his boss was arrested, El Chapo took over, eventually forming his own organization with other traffickers, the Sinaloa Cartel. He orchestrated the movement of cocaine and heroin into the United States using planes, trucks, and even rail cars. He also began constructing cross-border tunnels, a skill that would prove invaluable years later. In those early years, one event truly cemented El Chapo's reputation. This is when Jesus Posadas Ocampo, the Archbishop of Guadalajara and a cardinal, holding one of the highest positions in the Catholic Church, Posadas was widely respected, advocating for the poor and openly condemning the drug trade. On this day, he is en route to the airport to meet a Vatican ambassador. Simultaneously, El Chapo and his bodyguards arrive in the same parking lot, planning to catch a flight to Puerto Vallarta, one of El Chapo's favorite party destinations. What precisely unfolded next in that parking lot remains unclear. But one grim certainty is that the cardinal would not survive. The official account states that the Arellano Felix brothers, who ran a rival drug trafficking operation out of Tijuana, were at war with El Chapo. They were vying for drug-running territory, and somehow learned El Chapo would be at the airport. One of the brothers, along with a group of gunmen, rushed there to ambush him. Upon spotting El Chapo and his bodyguards, they exited their vehicles and opened fire. El Chapo and his men scrambled towards the terminal, taking cover behind parked cars as bullets rained down. Miraculously, they escaped unharmed. This failed assassination attempt left 7 people dead, including the cardinal. This is the version authorities publicly reported. Posadas was caught in the crossfire. A case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. However, doubts persist about this narrative. His death didn't appear accidental. Forensic experts later concluded it was likely the gunmen deliberately killed the cardinal. He was shot 14 times at close range. Officials later suggested the gunmen mistook the cars, noting El Chapo regularly drove a white Mercury Grand Marquis, the same model Posadas was in that day. They supposedly thought it was El Chapo's car and opened fire. But the cardinal was wearing his distinctive robe when shot, hardly dressed like a drug lord if shot at close range. How could he have been confused with El Chapo? Years later, Posadas' successor made a grave accusation, claiming the cardinal's murder was a crime of the state. He believed Mexican police carried out the killing on behalf of the government. as Posadas had previously accused government officials of ties to these cartels. To this day, the true events of May 1993 at Guadalajara Airport remain shrouded in mystery. This is El Chapo's wife, his sons, and a trusted associate. Just 2 months prior, El Chapo had been captured and imprisoned in Altiplano maximum security prison. Now, this group is orchestrating his escape. Their plan begins with purchasing an old property situated about half a mile from the prison. Next, they acquire a nearby warehouse to stash weapons and an armored pickup truck. Then, they hire workers for a highly specialized task, digging a complex tunnel. Following the 1993 Guadalajara Airport shootout, the Mexican government placed a bounty on El Chapo. It took just 2 weeks for him to be located and arrested. He denied responsibility for the Cardinal's death, insisting he was the intended target. Ultimately, authorities believed him, charging him only with drug trafficking, not homicide. He was sentenced to 20 years in a Mexican prison. However, from behind bars, he continued to command the Sinaloa Cartel through his lawyers. He relayed orders to his closest allies. He didn't need to be physically present to exert control. His vast empire operated on whispered instructions and meticulously coordinated maneuvers. True power can, at times, be wielded remotely. Add, with any desk, you can access any desktop from anywhere. It supports all major platforms: Windows, Mac, iOS, Linux, and more, offering complete security and top-notch performance. AnyDesk is ideal if you want to work remotely, perhaps from sunny Mexico. Without lugging your bulky desktop with you, our team uses it constantly. The connection is so fast, it often feels like we're right at our home PC. It's also perfect for helping a friend or colleague fix a software issue remotely, with no lag, no limits, no middlemen, and while keeping your data private. Visit anydesk.com/fern to keep your empire running, no matter where you are. By 2001, El Chapo was tired of prison life. Moreover, the Mexican Supreme Court had just approved a law facilitating the extradition of criminals like him to the U.S. It was time to leave. The official account of his first prison escape is dramatic. He allegedly bribed a guard who helped him hide in a laundry cart. The guard then pushed the cart out of the cell, through hallways, and past an unguarded gate to the parking lot. El Chapo supposedly emerged and climbed into the trunk of a car. The guard drove to the outer prison gate, and after a superficial search, the car was waved through, the trunk unchecked. But this is merely the official story. Several authors and journalists remain skeptical. One argues that the prison's checkpoints featured heat and motion sensors, capable of detecting any living creature, even a cat, meaning alarms should have been triggered. Instead, this journalist proposes El Chapo might have left the prison dressed in a police uniform, escorted by other corrupt officers. Regardless of the exact method, systemic corruption undoubtedly played a significant role, and El Chapo wasted no time putting his newfound freedom to use. In the years that followed, the landscape of Mexican cartels underwent a dramatic shift. In 2002, the leader of the Tijuana Cartel, one of the brothers who allegedly attempted to assassinate El Chapo at the airport, was killed in a shootout with police. A year later, the leader of the Gulf Cartel is arrested, with 2 major cartels now leaderless. El Chapo seized the opportunity. He expanded into Tijuana and Gulf territories, sparking brutal conflicts. Nuevo Laredo, an area along the U.S.-Mexican border, effectively became a war zone. Former Mexican army forces began working for El Chapo, clashing with the remnants of the Gulf Cartel, whose core fighters had, in part, received U.S. training early on. This violence led to over 1,000 deaths, many of them civilians, and that was just the beginning. In 2006, Felipe Calderon became Mexico's new president. Determined to confront organized crime, he declared war on the cartels and deployed the military. The violence escalated dramatically. Between 2007 and 2014, over 160,000 people died during Mexico's war on drugs. Amidst this bloodshed, El Chapo ascended, becoming the world's most wanted criminal and transforming the Sinaloa Cartel into one of history's most powerful criminal organizations. It became the primary supplier of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and fentanyl to the United States. El Chapo's cartel operated in 50 countries, generating billions of dollars in profits annually. Consequently, El Chapo amassed immense wealth, eventually landing on Forbes' list of the world's billionaires. It's no surprise he was so difficult to keep imprisoned. El Chapo's rescue team needed the precise location of his prison cell. So, they smuggled a GPS watch into his cell, cleverly disguised as a food item. Now, the workers knew exactly where to dig. Over the course of a year, they constructed an elaborate tunnel, a meticulously planned, complex engineering feat costing approximately $5 million. The tunnel stretched nearly a mile long and stood about 5.5 feet high, reinforced by a wooden frame, complete with lighting and even a ventilation system. To manage the enormous amount of excavated dirt, the workers built a rail system with a modified motorcycle to transport the debris out of the tunnel. This setup was also designed to serve as an escape vehicle later. But how did El Chapo end up in Altiplano in the first place? Andrew Hogan, an agent with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration (D), was determined to bring down the most powerful drug lord on Earth, possibly in history. He began seeking allies, only to discover there was no dedicated task force. No team, not even a single federal agent assigned to capture El Chapo. Undeterred, Hogan took Spanish classes and prepared to relocate to Mexico. Meanwhile, one of Andrew's colleagues in the U.S. managed to obtain the pin to El Chapo's BlackBerry, thanks to an informant within his inner circle. This led them to track El Chapo's phone to the holiday resort of Cabo San Lucas. The excited colleague immediately called Andrew, and they passed the information to Mexican officials. The D and Mexican police quickly descended on the supposed hideout, but El Chapo was nowhere to be found. Next, they narrowed El Chapo's phone signal to one of 3 mansions near Cabo San Lucas. This time, it was a hit. He was there. But before forces could arrive, El Chapo slipped away through a back door. He somehow reached an airstrip undetected and was flown to safety. El Chapo consistently seemed one step ahead, constantly changing SIM cards and phones, simply outsmarting authorities. One D agent reportedly quipped that Mexicans couldn't catch El Chapo, even if he were standing at the Starbucks across the street from the embassy. Yet, Andrew Hogan persisted. In May 2012, he moved to Mexico City with his family and took charge of the Sinaloa case. In the ensuing months, he and his team began intercepting members of El Chapo's inner circle. Bit by bit, they pieced together the cartel's intricate communications system, how frequently numbers changed, potential code names, and GPS locations. Slowly, a clearer picture emerged. One day, El Chapo seemingly wanted to meet an underling in person and sent one of his chauffeurs to pick him up. Hogan tracked the chauffeur's phone. The signal ultimately led to a group of 5 houses in Culiacan. Hogan organized a capture operation with dozens of Mexican Marines, helicopters, and trucks, joining the mission himself. They surrounded the property and stormed inside. But once again, El Chapo was gone. Instead, they found a strangely placed bathtub concealing the entrance to a tunnel leading into Culiacan sewers. This time, however, the Marines remained on El Chapo's trail. 3 days later, they discovered one of his men had driven him to a hotel in the coastal town of Mazatlan. The Marines entered the 4th floor of the hotel, storming into room 401. Heading straight for the bedroom, El Chapo was there with his family. He barricaded himself in the bathroom with an assault rifle. His wife pleaded with the soldiers not to harm their daughters, Shortly after, El Chapo surrendered. They had him. Andrew Hogan's mission was complete. He had captured the most wanted man on the planet. Concerned for the safety of his family, who had moved to Mexico with him, they boarded a plane back to the U.S. Meanwhile, El Chapo was sent to Altiplano, and the U.S. began pushing hard for his extradition, which would almost certainly mean the end of his reign. It was time for another tunnel. The rescue team and workers successfully located the exact spot of El Chapo's cell shower. They constructed a 33-foot vertical passageway connecting the tunnel to the cell, complete with a ladder. All this digging and drilling generated significant noise, leading several inmates to complain, but the guards ignored them. El Chapo's rescue team managed to complete the $5 million tunnel directly into his prison cell without any interference. All that remained was breaking through the cell floor. And so, the day arrived. El Chapo sat on his bed, closely monitored by a surveillance camera that also recorded audio. A television volume was turned up, yet loud banging noises were audible. Likely someone breaking through the cell floor. Next, El Chapo began pacing his cell. After a moment, he walked to his shower stall, bent over, and returned to his bed. He removed his shoes, sat for a second, then walked behind the shower wall and simply disappeared. He squeezed through the hole in the ground, which was just 20 by 20 inches wide, 3 feet below. He found footing on a ladder and climbed down 33 feet until he reached the tunnel. Someone was already waiting for him, likely his wife's brother. The rescuer sat on the modified motorcycle on the rails, and El Chapo climbed on behind him. Together, they made the nearly 1-mile ride to the other end of the tunnel. Upon arrival, El Chapo and his companion climbed a small ladder through the exit shaft, emerging into an unfinished house covered with construction material. An ATV is parked outside. They drove a short distance to a warehouse and switched to an SUV. Then, they drove for 2 hours until they reached an airstrip. A plane was already waiting. They boarded it and flew to Sinaloa. 2 months later, one of El Chapo's sons posted a tweet, "I'm doing fine here. You already know with whom." Attached was a photo, presumably with his father. The tweet was tagged with Costa Rica. But let's pause for a second. Some aspects of this spectacular escape simply don't add up. There's video footage of guards watching their screens as El Chapo disappeared, yet it took them 20 minutes to check his cell. They even waited a few more minutes before finally entering and inspecting the escape hole. Furthermore, it seems highly unlikely that building such a tunnel went truly unnoticed, especially since inmates actively complained about the drilling noise. A large majority of Mexicans believe the escape was an inside job. Shortly after El Chapo's second prison escape, the prison's warden and 2 other officials were fired. Next, 4 Mexican officials were charged, 2 members of Mexico's Secret Service stationed at the prison, and 2 guards who were in the control room monitoring El Chapo's cell. The accusation was that they bought El Chapo valuable time by not raising the alarm once the drug lord was gone, and El Chapo, he once again became one of the most wanted criminals on earth. The pressure to finally bring him to justice was higher than ever. The hunt was on. Then El Chapo made an audacious move. Knowing he was already a legend in Mexico, he craved even greater fame, a movie about his life on the big screen. Sean Penn was already involved in a production about him, alongside Mexican actress Kate Del Castillo. Castillo managed to contact El Chapo and his associates, and eventually, El Chapo agreed to meet her and Sean Penn in person to discuss the film, all while technically on the run. This is a photo from that meetup. Sean Penn interviewed El Chapo about his career as a drug lord, a story later published by Rolling Stone. In the article, Penn revealed that El Chapo's tunnel engineers had been flown to Germany for 3 months of extensive, additional training, deemed necessary to manage the low-lying water table beneath the prison. It was a gripping read. Penn wrote, beneath his smile, there's a doubtlessness to his facial expression, The question comes to mind as I observe his face, both as he speaks as while he listens. What is it that removes all doubt from a man's eyes? Is it power, admirable clarity, or soullessness? However, according to government sources, this interview was also a crucial factor for investigators to get closer to El Chapo, apparently. They were closely monitoring Penn and Castillo's movements the entire time. On October 9, 2015, Mexican special forces closed in on him in the mountains of Sinaloa. After some time, they actually spotted him with only one bodyguard. This was their moment. They pursued them, chasing them through the rugged terrain. As they drew nearer, El Chapo tumbled off a cliff. His bodyguard found him and carried him deeper into the forest. The special forces lost sight of them, and they escaped a catastrophic failure. But authorities didn't abandon the hunt. In January 2016, they got another chance. Marines successfully located El Chapo once again, this time in the coastal city of Los Mochis. The crucial clue came from a taco order placed from a white van. Witnesses identified the driver as one of El Chapo's men. The Marines began surveilling the car, which ultimately led them to a safe house. A few hours later, soldiers stormed the residence. Cartel gunmen attempted to hold them off, and a fierce gunfight erupted. The Marines eventually pushed to the second floor, then to the roof. But El Chapo was gone, true to his pattern. He and one of his gunmen had fled through a hidden tunnel. They were now climbing out of a drainage tunnel a short distance away. Directly across from a Walmart, El Chapo and his gunmen needed to escape quickly. They stole a car at gunpoint, but after driving just a few blocks, the car broke down, causing them to ditch it and lose valuable time. They then took over another car and managed to get onto the highway. But it was too late. Police finally arrested El Chapo, one of history's most powerful drug lords. He told the officers, "You are all going to die," claiming 40 of his assassins were en route to free him. But he was handed over to the Marines. And it was over, after a decade of hide-and-seek, repeated escapes, and in all likelihood, protection. By systemic corruption, El Chapo has finally been caught. Later that day, the Mexican president tweeted, "Mission accomplished. We have him." Soon after, El Chapo was extradited to the United States, the one thing he truly feared. On July 17, 2019, 3 years after his second escape, he was sentenced to life in Colorado's Supermax prison, where he remains locked up to this day. The Sinaloa Cartel and other Mexican cartels remain as strong as ever, operating as undeterred global organizations.